If you change the formula of mayonnaise, there will be complete and utter outrage all across the South. Welcome, everybody. Welcome where the madness never sleeps, ladies and gentlemen. What's going on, Tigs, Wigs? Buckle up. Southern brands like Duke's Mayo cashing out. Crazy. Some fresh JFK file bombshells that Grok has uncovered a little bit. Today, we're going to talk about some of that. We got that started the other night. We're going to continue a little bit with it. And a pen debate that's so fierce, it's going to leave ink on the walls. Yeah, so we're going to dive into the chaos, the culture, and a little bit of everything in between. So let's get rolling. But before we do me a favor. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment. We read them all. So, drop something. Tell us what you think. Also, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, hit that follow button. And look, if you love the show, leave us a quick rating and a review. It seriously helps more people find us. And hey, if you're feeling frisky, if you're feeling generous and you want to support the show, you can always send a little love to our Venmo, Tigs Bits Show LLC. Let's hit on a little bit of news. I saw this, I think, this morning. Everything's just kind of a blur for me right now, but Duke's Mayo. It's kind of funny because just the other day, it wasn't that long ago that I put a couple weeks ago that I made a little poll on social media, picture of Duke's Mayo, picture of Blue Plate, because that's the preferred mayo in the state of Louisiana, and put that out there to see what people thought. Like, what's your favorite mayonnaise out there? And I was surprised, honestly, going into it, even though I know we have a large contingent of Louisiana folks that follow the show, I was really thinking that Duke's would run away with it. I thought it'd be like 70-30, something like that, just because of the popularity of Duke's over the last handful of years. And that bowl game is certainly not hurt their cause at all in getting their brand out there. So honestly, I'd never really heard of Duke's mayonnaise until 5 or 6 years ago, whenever they, started really pumping the brand. But they were bought. They sold to a group in Boston, Advent International. The terms were not disclosed. That always makes everybody a little bit nervous. Now, it's not the first time that Duke's mayonnaise had been sold to someone, but, it's still a little concerning. One of the things that comes to mind for me is, and I had them today with a sandwich, Zapp's potato chips. I don't know if some of you guys have ever had Zapp's, but they're like a kettle cooked chip, crispy, just a kettle kind of chip with all the yummy Louisiana spices on them. They have different, of course, they have different flavors. Well, they sold, I think it was 2011, they sold to Utz in Pennsylvania, and they kept a regional deal here. I think we've talked about this on the show. They kept a regional deal here in Louisiana. The original plant was still one, but once COVID hit, I'm pretty sure it was either COVID or a hurricane that took it out. They don't make Zapp's in Louisiana anymore. It's still Louisiana. It's labeled as a Louisiana deal, but Zapp's is not made in Louisiana. Now, I can't tell a difference in the way they taste at this point. Still, thank God, they still taste like Zapp's. But I can tell you one thing: the bags aren't as full. It's a lot more air in that bag than it used to be, especially, just 10 years ago, back, I guess it's once Utz took over, I'd say 5 years ago, once they got out of Louisiana, we got the rest of what America got, which kind of sucks, to be honest with you. So it's mayonnaise. If you change the formula of mayonnaise, there will be complete and utter outrage all across the South. Zero doubt. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen with Duke's. I am a little bit concerned that could happen. So I started thinking, what are some other Southern brands out there that sold to some northern, and this is not a north versus south kind of deal, but I think it does make, I think it is it's noteworthy with the culture that is in the south versus the culture that's in the north. That is different vibes. If you want to just go there, it's just different vibes. And people in the south aren't going to be too happy about it, but this has happened before. Bojangles, it's a North Carolina-based fried chicken and biscuit chain. Heard of it, pretty sure I've eaten at one somewhere, but not as familiar with it as I am with other things that are out there, but I'm sure a bunch of you guys are. So that's one that got sold out. So that kind of, you got to worry about them. Crystal Burger, they were founded in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and some of the best Crystal burgers I've ever had are around there. They don't have any around here, and they never really have. But Crystal, back in the day, 15, 20 years ago, loved them. I don't know if they're still any good or not, but they sold to a New York firm in 2020. Piggly Wiggly, I don't know if you guys are super familiar with them. There's still a Piggly Wiggly here in Baton Rouge. They were everywhere in the South. They were a Tennessee grocer. Yeah, that's what they're called. I've been talking so much today, y'all. I'm doing good. But Piggly Wiggly, they sold in the early 2000s to a New Hampshire-based company called C&S Wholesale Grocers. And then Sawyer Brands, that's who bought Duke prior to all of this in 2019. So, you just got to hope for the case of Dukes and all that they don't lose their identity. I doubt they will, honestly. I think this is probably just making a little bit of something out of nothing, but it's still a little bit concerning. Something else, speaking of controversy, this came up this morning. So I'm on the road, I'm working, selling insurance, having conversations with folks, and somehow or another, this just hit me because we started talking about it. I had one of these pens, and they made a comment, "That's a nice pen. Don't you like that pen?" And I went, "Oh, yeah. I love this pen. It's the best writing pen that there is, and they're cheap." This is the old Pilot G2. This is a 10. I was using this one, though. I was using the 7. And then thus this conversation happened. So we start talking a little bit, and she said, "Oh, there's a big difference in that 7 and that 10. And I went, "Really? Okay." Because I've never compared the two side by side. So let's do it. Let's do it now and then talk a little bit about this, because it made me come up with some stuff. And I got a feeling this really only affects people over the age of, I'd say 30. Before anything under 30, you probably don't write as much as all of us over 30. So it ages ourselves a little bit, but I know my demo. All right, so I'm just going to write Tigs. I'm just going to simply write Tigs. And this is with the Pilot G207, a finer tip. So Tigs, Tigs, I do believe. And there you see, nice, sharp, flat, all that, not bleeding, not too punchy, just nice. Nice, it was smooth to write on, And then you take the 10, little bolder. You really want to get out there. It's better for signatures, stuff like that. Tigs. Much darker, a little fatter, as you can see. I don't know which one. I'm just scribbling. It feels so smooth writing with the 10. And the lady that I was talking to, she was a proponent for the 10. She preferred the 10. I still think that I prefer the 7. 7's just a little bit thinner. I think it's better for most applications. I can't believe we're having this conversation, but we are. The 7, I think, is better for all applications. So let's do a little bit of digging. This got me started because I had no idea they were, honestly, I did. I've had a Mont Blanc. I won one of those things at one point in time. I sold it. I ain't going to lie. I'm like, I don't need a $300 pen or whatever it is. I'm not ever going to use that thing. So I sold it. But the Pilots have always been good, but I never really realized there were all these dang options. So here's the biggest differences in the 7 and the 10. What it is the 7's like 0.7 millimeters and the 10 is 1.0 millimeters. So it's 1 millimeter. But they go down, I believe, to like 0.5 and 0.38. So it's just the finer the tip, the better it's going to write, I guess. So did a little trivia with that stuff. And the G2 is marketed as America's #1 selling gel pen. So I don't know, is that just marketing? Do you guys use something a little bit different? I mean, they do have a large range, like I mentioned. So what do y'all think? Do y'all have any particular pens that you like to use? And Mike says that he's loving this. Yeah. I don't know if it's the pen conversation or the Winn-Dixies, but yeah, we're all over the place tonight. No structure. You're just getting raw Tiggy's brain and what's been on my mind. But pens are out there. There you go, Haley, sweet Haley. I know she loves some pens. I know she does. I had this conversation with Riley today, too, and he didn't seem as interested. But I'm so proud of Haley. I don't know if I've ever really mentioned this on the show. My sweet daughter is in her junior year at LSU, and she's student teaching. And I've been enrolling these folks that I've been talking to are teachers. So teachers and pens, they know what's up. They know what they're talking about. Yeah, Haley says that the 1 millimeter is thicker. It really depends on your penmanship, though. I write hard, like I push down hard, like I don't do anything light in life at all. So the bold for me is probably a little too much. It's going to run a little bit. I think that's why I've always liked the 7. I could probably even get away with the 5, honestly. Some of the top selling pens out there, of course, you've got the Pilot Precise V5. So that one's going to be a little bit more. There's the Pentel Energel RTX. That's a 0.7. The Uniball Jetstream, of course, I think is the creme de la creme. I heard whenever I was talking about that today, they were like, well, you better be bringing up the Uniball if we're going to be talking about pens. Like, okay, we'll bring up the Uniball. It is #1 on the list. So, yeah, crazy. Who knows? Who knew that pens would be so interesting? And hell, maybe they're not, but I think they are. I asked Grok the other night. It said that it did not have enough time to go through all 80,000 pages of everything, but it had gone through about 70 or so, which I found to be BS to begin with. Like, you went through 70,000, but you didn't get the last. So anyhow, asked again today. Have you gone through it? I'm just going to kind of read some of these talking points that it gave me because, I mean, I read all of it and went deep into it, and I just said, give me some talking points for the show for this because it's too much. I don't want to spend 30 minutes on it. We will talk more about this. I think more things need to develop from it over time. AI is not going to solve every single thing and connect every single dot that happened on that, but some big things to note so far. Oswald's trip to Mexico City was a huge communication breakdown, and maybe that's some of the stuff that they never wanted to get out. All of this, it still points to the lone shooter of Lee Harvey Oswald. We all know that is probably not the way it happened. Now, I think he was involved. I do believe that he was involved somehow. Maybe if he was set up, that's possible, some of that stuff. But I don't know, man. I don't know. They had tracked him. So what's new? There was a trip to Mexico City. The CIA had tracked Oswald meeting a KGB-linked Soviet official in September of 1963, but they did not fully alert the FBI until weeks later, leaving gaps in surveillance. And you got to remember, this is in the 60s. They didn't have computers and stuff. It wasn't as fast as it is these days, but still, that's a large enough period of time. Those guys are moving fast enough. So why does that matter? It shows how agency silos let Oswald slip through the cracks, which happened. And there's a pretty notable quote from a CIA memo in there that we underestimated the operational significance of the contact. You think? Do you think? So, I mean, the CIA had Oswald on tape with Soviet agent, and they did not bring that information to the FBI. They did not ring that bell loud enough or soon enough. That's a problem. That's a problem. Talking point number 2, the pre-assassination warnings, the drop signals. The FBI had a tip about Oswald asking for rifles days before the assassination. The CIA intercepted a vague American with plans call. Neither one of them shared, and neither one acted fast. So there was some talk coming in. The American with plans apparently came from the Soviets, from what I read. Duh. Like, none of this is really that shocking. It's just interesting that it's all kind of been covered up and swept under the rug. Why does that matter, really? It highlights a lack of real-time coordination that might have flagged Oswald's threat level. A big notable quote: FBI inertia prevented escalation of domestic leads. That's from the CIA. So they're just both, they're pointing fingers. And after November of 1963, the CIA blamed the FBI for not following up domestically, while the FBI accused the CIA of hoarding intel. And why does that matter? Well, that little rift kind of is what's fueled all these conspiracy theories. It's more than just egos, and it's more than just a cover-up, is kind of the thing that you got to take away from that. In fact, J. Edgar Hoover said this in a January 1964 memo: the CIA's games cost us. That's crazy. The CIA's games cost us. Of course, Hoover was fuming and scribbling that the CIA's secrecy pretty much screwed them up. But, I mean, that's straight from the files. He said it. So, I mean, a lot of finger pointing going on. These turf wars over Castro. The CIA shielded Mexico City to protect anti-Castro ops, while the FBI fixated on domestic communism, clashing over who owned Oswald. And why does that matter? There's ties. That ties the friction to bigger stakes, showing just how global games muddied the domestic picture. Just a lot of noise going on everywhere in the world at that point in time. I guess if you're an intelligence agency, and this is post-World War II, you're listening to a lot of stuff. Everybody's coming for America. I mean, the Cold War, all those, the Bay of Pigs, all that stuff that happened prior to November of 1963. It's all going on. A notable quote from that is, "We shielded some data to preserve resource, or to preserve sources." That is direct from the CIA retrospective in 1967. So the CIA was playing chess with Castro, keeping secrets even from the FBI, and Oswald kind of just got lost in the shuffle. So, I mean, the biggest thing that you could say that comes from it, and there's one more thing, but the biggest thing from all of that, dysfunction. Not really a conspiracy, though I think there is one, but based off of that, completely inept and dysfunctional. The FBI is not talking to the CIA, and vice versa. They have all of the line of stuff. They have this guy's on the radar, all of that. They do nothing with it. And what happens? How convenient that they did nothing with it, yet they were following them, both of them, and did nothing. Seems like something that happened this summer a little bit. It's kind of interesting. But then there's one thing that we didn't talk about, and the one thing I want to know about is there anything said about the grassy knoll? I mean, of all of the places, everything, all of that, like the grassy knoll is always what looked like where something could have happened. And so there's a little bit, there's some eyewitness chaos that took place over there. And on November 21st of 1963, an FBI report in the file cites that there's a Dallas witness named Jean Hill who swore she saw a puff of smoke from the grassy knoll right before the fatal shot, alongside a man fleeing. And then there's another witness, S.M. Holland. He told the FBI he heard a crack from the knoll, distinct from the depository shots. So that's interesting. Those accounts clash with what the Warrens Commission's long gunman line is, and the files show that the FBI didn't chase them hard, fueling speculation that the CIA knew a lot more than they did. They did. But Jean Hill, I saw smoke and a figure running right there on that hill. That's from an FBI interview on November 21st, 1963. Then there's the Knoll Rush. A Dallas Police Department log from 12/31 on November 22nd notes officers converging on grassy knoll after witnesses pointed there. A Secret Service's agent's memo, unredacted now, says they initially thought shots came from the right front, the knoll's direction. Why does that matter? Well, the immediate reaction suggests that the scene wasn't locked on Oswald's perch. The files hint that the CIA's silence on Mexico City intel left everyone grasping for straws, which it did. And there's a Secret Service memo that's been uncovered. Agents believe gunfire originated from an automatic weapon on the grassy knoll. Hello. So, I mean, grassy knoll stuff's not gone. I think they've done a good job of burying it to where they just never followed up on it. It's like they just kind of moved away from probably where it happened, or at least one of those shots. And then the mob whisper. Of course, that's been one of the biggest things in all of this is the mob. Always been talked about New Orleans and the rifle and the mob and all of that stuff. Well, that's always going to be going on. Roselli is the mob boss back then, and in 1964, a CIA informant reported ties to Johnny Roselli to a grassy knoll asset that was cleaned up post-hit. Pretty vague, but somebody got cleaned up, and Roselli bragged about a knoll job that loose ends were tied. So but I've also heard things too with him that, of course, he was just being braggadocious. That was in his character and all of that stuff. He wasn't, he knew he wasn't. He just wanted to talk a bunch of crap and a bunch of noise. But anyhow, that's the latest from Grok on that. At the end of the day, the CIA and FBI didn't talk. There's still things out there, and I don't know if we've gotten anything answered. If anything, I think it's made this maybe a little more interesting. Mike says, I feel like this is a top-notch boomer conversation. We talked about pins. We talked about JFK tonight. We've talked about Duke's Mayo. You nailed it. Stay safe out there this weekend. Everybody have fun. If you hadn't hit the like button, hit that like wherever it is that you're watching this. We'll see y'all.